Hi there! In this video training, I share my foundational concepts for starting any drawing, regardless of the subject, whether it's a flower or a beetle or a mammal or a landscape, or in today's demonstration, a European robin. The focus will be on shape because that's what comes first and needs to be correct before adding any shading or three-dimensional form or colors or textures or patterns. I suggest having the handout for this training handy, the 6-step roadmap to sketching success. And note first that really accurate, realistic, representational drawing requires two things: hand-eye coordination, which comes with lots of practice, and really looking at your subject without any preconceived notions. You're not drawing from memory or imagination, but from direct, sustained observation. Alrighty, so now I'm going to go over what I call the 6-step roadmap to sketching success. Can you see that there? So hopefully you have that, and we're going to go over each of those steps, which include blocking in, relative proportions, alignment, flow lines, angles, and negative shapes. And unlike the name that suggests steps, these aren't necessarily steps in order, but they're basically concepts that go together and things that I like to think of as I'm going through a drawing and from the beginning to the end of the drawing. So as the drawing progresses, I continue to think about each of these concepts in turn. And so the first one we're going to be talking about is blocking in. And basically that's where you're just thinking of shapes, looking at your organism and saying to yourself, do I see a circle, an oval, a square, a triangle, a line, that sort of thing. And so that's basically a very sort of left-brained, symbolic way to start our drawing. And so basically, in this case, showing the European robin here that we're using an example, you would start with the largest shape and build the smaller ones around them. So looking at this, the body, the main oval shape of the body, we'd get that in first. And then we would add the more oval for the head. And noticing that that's an oval that's sort of sitting down inside of the top of that circle. And next we see we can build the extremities onto that base. So we would see the triangle, say, of the bill. And we would see this triangle of the wings. And sort of this rectangle of the tail. And then the area of the feet. We would kind of look at that and see kind of two triangles there. Okay, so that's what I call blocking in. The next step is looking at proportions. And that pretty much goes hand in hand with blocking in. You can use your pencil and finger as a measurement to look at the relative proportions of, say, the head to the body to the tail, the legs to the head, those kind of things. And so I will usually use my pencil, well, I'm going to use a regular pencil here, and I will look at my organism and I will use my finger and the end of the pencil to measure the relative lengths of one part to another. And again, I might be saying these things to myself, like, are these two shapes in the same proportion? Is one half as large or a third larger? That kind of thing. So again, for looking at our robin here, we might see that we have this circle, and what proportion is the head to that? Perhaps maybe a third of that. Or we might look at the length of the tail here and say, what is the proportion of that to, say, the length of the legs? almost the same. Of course, maybe the back leg would be maybe half the length of the tail. So again, that's relative proportions, which really goes hand in hand with blocking in. The next step is looking at alignment, or what structures are in alignment with other structures. So I like to think of this in carpentry terms. My father was a carpenter, and he would use what was called a plumb line to line up different structures. And that's what you can think of here as well. So for example, you might drop a line down the front of the body, and noticing that the bill is the structure farthest to the left, then comes the chest, and then comes the legs a little bit behind it. Okay, so I really like to line things up, alignment. Another good example is the bill and the eye. If I were to draw a line between the bill and the eye, it would go right through the middle of the eye. So that would help me place the eye. Or for example, the tail. Lining that up. What structures does the tail line up with? It kind of goes through the front area of the eye. And how about the legs? So if I drew a line, now these are imaginary lines I'm drawing that I'm thinking about when I'm looking at my organism. So this leg is at the angle that comes out kind of halfway down the wing. Whereas the back leg is at a slightly different angle because the bird is turned. And so that's going to align with a little bit different part of the back and actually eventually touch in a little triangle. What else can we see aligned? The two legs are pretty much aligned parallel with each other. So alignment is another important concept to think about, the third concept to think about when you're drawing. Next comes an idea that I call flow lines. And this is kind of a more esoteric idea, but I really like to use it. So if you were imagining that your subject is like a rock in the middle of a river, and your flow lines are the water that would be flowing around that. So it just is a way to help you to, again, line up different structures to draw your organism. So in this robin we're looking at here, thinking a flow line might go like this, or like this. And this concept may not work for you, but it really works for me to look at what things line up and how that pencil, which is like flowing water, would flow around your subject. So the fifth step of my 6-step roadmap to sketching success is looking at angles. And again here, when you're looking at your organism, you can think or even say out loud the angles you see. And if you want, if you're mathematically inclined, you could think of the angles as like 120 degree angle, 90 degree, 60 degree, 40, 30, that kind of thing. So there's lots of angles on this bird that we can look at that will help us to draw things more accurately. We could look at the angle of the bill here. I would say that's maybe a 120 degree angle. Whereas the angle under the bill is more like 90 degrees. We might look at the feet. Noticing that angle of the rear foot is maybe 110 or 20 degrees. Whereas the angle of that rear leg is less than 90 degrees, maybe 45 degrees. Similarly, we could look at this angle and this angle. Very similar to the other two, although with this front rear what do you call that, rear leg, that angle is a little bit wider than of the rear leg. So see those two angles? Just slightly different, and that will help you to show the distance. That's another angle we could look at here. Maybe that one. All of these steps can also be used, of course, for the internal part of your organism. So if you looked at the angles of, say, the color patterns, and maybe the angle of this rusty color would go like maybe 90 degrees. And this angle here of this part, maybe 45 degrees. Oh, let's see, the angle of the wing. Maybe 45 degrees. So that's another way to look at your organism, is the angles that you can see. Last but not least in this 6-step roadmap to sketching success is the concept of negative shapes or negative spaces. And that's basically just the area that surrounds your subject that is not your subject. And so it's kind of related to angles. And it's just another way to look at your organism and draw it more realistically. The best negative shape we can see on this organism here is between the front and rear leg. So that would be this shape in here. So you see that's not quite, it's not quite a square, it's not quite a triangle, it's its own shape. You even have a tiny negative shape right here where the wing doesn't quite touch the tail. You see that there? It's kind of small, but right in there. Those are some examples of negative shapes. Maybe even this shape in here, between the toes, here, or here. So when you're drawing, think of those shapes. Think, do I have a circle, a square, a triangle? And again, if you say it out loud, or at least to yourself, it'll really help you to slow down and really look. So I hope looking at these 6 steps or 6 concepts for sketching success have really helped you. The concepts of blocking in, relative proportions, alignment, flow lines, angles, and negative shapes. I use all of those concepts in the process of drawing an organism, and I'll go through those several times as I firm up my drawing and I continue to look and to get the drawing closer and closer to what we see in real life. Well, I hope this concept has been really helpful for you, and I hope that you will apply it in the next drawing you do. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.